I am Ayo Myro Essay, and also
Valentine. Good morning.
all right. Today on today's show we have two analysts, two gentlemen analysts. We have Mr. C. Good morning, Mr. C.
Good morning, Valentine.
Hello.
Good morning, Cheta. Good morning, Vegas.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. C. You could also have Chetan one. Good morning, Chetan.
Good morning. Thank you for repairing the AC.
Thank you. You're most welcome.
And congrats, Valentine, on everything.
Thank you
Yes,
very
thank you.
much. Congratulations all round. All right, this is how you part of the conversation. Send your message to WhatsApp. By the way, we are live on YouTube, so youtube.com, search for Smooth 981 FM Lagos. On WhatsApp, send us your message.
WhatsApp number is 0809444081.
All right, let's get straight into our stories. We're starting from the bottom. Federal government suffers 1.76 trillion naira revenue shortfall in months. Cheta, I'll start with you. The federal government recorded a revenue shortfall of 1.76 trillion naira in the first half of this year, according to official data. According to a revenue performance report which was obtained from the Budget Office of the Federation, the federal government's projected revenue for the 2021 fiscal year was 7.9 trillion naira, of which 3.9 trillion naira was earmarked as pro rata targets for the first 6 months. It's a detailed report from the Punch newspaper, where at least as much information as they could obtain at this time. But this, I'm sure, by the time you break this down for us has many implications.
Your HVAC.
My Yoruba part. I wish you would overlook certain things, Cheta. Thank you.
No, being married to Yoruba woman,
I
we always
knew
have this.
that's why you smile. But yes, please let's go through this revenue shortfall and what this means, as we're going to be discussing money in different parts of the stories this morning.
So I don't even know where to start because it's a problem. But I think the first and most fundamental problem of the whole thing has been this consistent refusal to cut our quotes according to our size. So we've been hearing different budgets every year, budget of consolidation, budget of this, and each year consistently we've been told that this is the highest budget ever. But by the time after the year you look at budget performance reports, we've not had a budget for some years now that did beyond 50% performance. That in itself should say a lot about where we really are in terms of the capacity of the Nigerian state to generate revenue. And the capacity of the Nigerian state to generate revenue flows into the next thing, which is the capacity of the Nigerian state to borrow.
Okay.
Now, borrowing is not a bad thing in itself. That's one thing that people do not. We've been socialized to look at borrowing as a bad thing in this point of part of the world.
Yes.
But the truth is, for example, Japan, their GDP to debt ratio is 225% or something like that. Ours is 35%, which is one of the lowest in the world. As a matter of fact, if you look at GDP to the US, is 127%. And you look at that GDP to debt ratio, you find that the more developed countries tend to have much higher GDP to debt ratio because it is an indicator of the capacity of the state to raise that revenue to pay back the debts. In Nigeria, the capacity of the states to raise revenue is severely limited and it's even dwindling because the trust that is necessary. I mean, let us look at, just take a thought experiment. Walk from one end of Adeola Adeku to the other end. And then look at this the FIRS notices pasted on the fences or the doors of businesses, notice of non-compliance. Yeah, those businesses still continue as if nothing,
Yes,
because that is one of the surest indicators of lack of state capacity to enforce. And then secondly, you add the fact that we claim that our tax base is low. In reality, it's not. I mean, we just, well, not just anymore, but about a month ago, we concluded and published a study that showed that 98% of Nigerians pay tax in one form or the other. But the problem is that the people who collect this taxes, these are non-state actors, and it is not
Remitted.
remitted. Yeah. Again, that speaks to that same thing: lack of government capacity to enforce. So essentially, we've let the wolves start watching over the hen house, but we don't have a way of getting that revenue from the wolves. So when you now have a situation where the government keeps saying, "Oh, I mean, this year's budget was supposed to be 13 point something trillion naira," and then they were the ones who set a target of for themselves that's that revenue collection will be 7.9 trillion naira, and then for the first half of the year to be 3.9 trillion. Now look at this: 1.76 trillion, which is less than half.
Something? Can we understand something, Cheta? So there are a number of things I'd like to ask based on this information. So number one, we have projections, which obviously they've fallen short
Consistently.
significantly. Yes. So is it that there's a problem with the projections? So in terms of how the areas that they believe they're going to generate revenue from. So is it that they overestimate? Do we have a
There was
challenge in the budget
something
office or
that
Ministry of
there
Finance?
was
has
something
explained?
back in the day when we used to have three analysts on Freshly Pressed, and there was a day that it was myself, Ugodre, and Tunji Andrews here, and three of us uniformly agreed that the what was it called? That's the document that the VP's office put up regarding the economy.
Economy, yeah.
Yeah, there was a document that they put up about projections, not MTEF now. A plan, Sha.
Yeah.
Three of us read it, and we all said this is a motivational document. It's not grounded in reality, and that is the problem.
Okay.
We like I started every year. We keep saying, "Oh, highest budget this, highest budget that," but every year for the past at least 7, we haven't had up to 50% budget performance. Is it not time to cut our quota and say, okay, we don't have the capacity to raise this, so this is what we can raise? Plan accordingly.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. And when we look at the other news headline stories, we would understand the implications of not having enough money. And like Cheta describes it, having a motivational plan whereby we just aspire to perspire, but there's no substance underneath it. So there's nothing to back it up. Let me come to you before we start talking numbers and how it affects different sectors of the economy. Mr. C, conflicting court orders, CJN demands records as 7 chief judges face probe today. That's Monday. Premium Times reports. Now, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Tanko Mohammed, has demanded the records of proceedings in the suits that led to the recent wave of conflicting court orders in the country. So we've talked about our judiciary, the judiciary, the justice system in Nigeria, and in recent times they've come under question. And now we've seen these matters come up with people, now the CGN is trying to rally people, rally judges round. But please break it down for us, explain to us, and then as always, I'd like to ask, what is the impact of this?
Okay, thank you very much. So last month we were treated to a slew of ridiculous judicial pronouncements from all over the country. And this started from the Anambra gubernatorial nomination processes, where all sorts of court orders, rulings, injunctions were flying all over the place. Then we moved over to the People's Democratic Party. On the 24th of August, a Rivers State High Court restrained Mr. Uche Secondus from parading himself as the PDP chairman. 3 days later, listen to this, a Kebbi State High Court restores him to. A day later, a high court in Calabar, Cross River State, restrains him again. Now, it's just clear that this is all ridiculous. Now, to the uninformed man on the street, it would appear as if money has exchanged hands, right?
Yeah.
However, I need to make this clear to everyone. A judge will only rule or decide on what is placed before him. So even if he's aware of facts, but they're not contained in what is before him, he cannot speak to them, because the system of justice we practice here, the judge is an uninterested non-participant. Our system of justice is adversarial. The parties will argue for themselves. Now, in civil law, the judge can descend into the arena and ask specific questions. Under the rule of law or the system of justice we inherited from Britain, our colonial master, he cannot do that. Now, the CJN has taken a good step. He's asked for the record of proceedings. Let me even see, let the NJC see what in fact was filed. Then, depending on what was filed, we can then determine if the judges acted ultra vires, were negligent, acted recklessly, and then the appropriate sanctions can be taken out. But this whole drama speaks to the fact that politicians and certain interested actors have been allowed to get away with forum shopping. There is no reason why a Burning Kirby State High Court should have issued any ruling. The PDP national office is in Abuja. The chairman operates from Abuja. It should have been a high court of the Federal Capital Territory.
So if I want a particular judgment, I go to a
And then
particular
two,
state.
and then two, furthermore,
See,
wait,
okay.
so furthermore, it speaks to the lack of a central record base.
Yeah.
which is what I wanted to
Because,
say.
listen, we've had conflicting judgments from the same Federal High Court, from the same Court of Appeal.
From different states.
So
you have
the
for
Calabar
example,
division-
they will go to Jigawa to talk about Anambra election, which happened, or they will go to Port Harcourt to talk about the local issue in Benin, which happened. I mean, it's he used the words forum shopping.
So you have the Calabar, you have one division saying Valentine's is a smart human being. You have another division saying Valentine is not actually smart. And
I agree with the second division.
and
Yeah, likewise.
it makes a mockery of
Yeah.
everything. But I'm curious as to why the chief justices were invited and they didn't include the individuals who actually delivered these questionable judgments and rulings.
I'm curious as to why they're still wearing those dirty wigs.
All right, there are many curiosities around, but thank you very much, Mr. C, for breaking it down for us. And I look forward to, what do you think will happen following this investigation? I think that's something I'll
Okay, so
Nothing.
no, that's not
Cheta,
correct.
let me
Cheta,
say
that's
please.
not correct. If anybody is found wanting, the person will be made a scapegoat and an example for others to fall in line. And some chief judges, if they're not careful, they lose their positions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Shegun on WhatsApp says we've been cutting our coat according to our size, but not according to our cloth. Tayo says, imagine the number of cases that we need review, or that need review, but we're not organized for judicial reviews. Victor Wakasi says, with the CJN's move, things will definitely change in terms of attitude of the court users and the adjudicators. It must be sustained, not just on political matters. The review of strategy should be institutionalized.
Absolutely. We have Yemi from Marina saying next year the federal government will still come out to tell the world that they plan on making over 4 trillion naira in taxes and related revenues. The reason is simple. They need to lie to our creditors about our ability to repay. God bless our Nigeria, he says.
Benga Komu says, what should be done to the lawyers who shop for these adjudicators, right? Or injunctions, rather. Let's move on to security matters. Jetta attacks Plateau, Kaduna to set up joint security committee. The Kaduna State Governor, Mr. Nasir El-Rufai, recommended this collaboration between both states, said they've been collaborating closely and working together, both governors, since 2015, when they realized that the two states played host to many people and shared borders. Your thoughts, please, on the move?
They just realized that the two states share a long border.
No, they didn't just realize. They realized since 2015.
I don't want to sound so critical, but the quote and unquote bandit problem in with respect to Kaduna is not from Kaduna's eastern flank, which is where Plateau is, but from Kaduna's western flank, which is where the Zamfara and Katsina, that intersection just after paying inquiry, that's where the problem is. Having said that, I think that governors collaborating is a good idea. I mean, it's kind of like what we saw in the southwest with Amotekun. It's kind of like what is supposed to have happened in the southeast with Ibubeagu, but those southeastern governors are not worth anything. They are not worth the seats that they sit on. The truth is that what would be more effective and sustainable is if they lobby their senators to give more power over security to the governors. Because to be fair to the governors, in as much as I don't like either of the governors involved in this particular thing, to be fair to them, they are castrated. they are supposed to be the chief security officers of their states, but the police commissioner in practice can go over their head and take orders from Abuja. That's the reality. So rather than setting up committees that, depending on what side of the bed the person in Abuja wakes up on in the morning, your committee will be rendered useless, at least according to the law. Why not lobby your Senate people to begin this talk of changing the framework? Because it is clear that the Nigerian security framework and architecture has failed completely. And one of the reasons is it is not localized. So let's talk about even our colonial masters. Our colonial masters, if you land in London today, you are in the domain of the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah.
If you start driving north towards, say, Manchester,
Yeah.
at some point you leave the domain of the Metropolitan Police and enter into the domain of the Thames Valley Police. They are two different organizations. And then you leave the Thames Valley Police, and then eventually you get to the Mancunian Police. Each of them different jurisdiction, different set of people, different policing, different lines of authority, and different people that they report to. Because the realization is that things like criminal activity tends to be highly localized.
Yeah.
Then there's a different discussion, which is why you now have covering agencies like the FBI or Interpol when you go high enough for trans-border or cross-border crimes. So this is the reality that we should be talking about. Not saying, oh, we're setting up a committee we should look at the systemic causes and talk about how to reform those root system problems.
So it's back to this conversation around state policing.
Yep.
Yes.
Summary.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Cheta.
We can't run from it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. C, let's come to a health matter that come to a very critical point. The Johetsu, the Joint Health Sector Union, are threatening to embark on a 15-day warning strike against the ultimatum, actually, giving them an ultimatum directly to the federal government through the Labour Minister and other stakeholders. They issued this on Saturday. And interestingly, there are several issues, 5 of them, that they're still reiterating, including health, hazard allowance, and retirement age and salary structure. But it's interesting in this same story that the federal government is now backtracking on their threats earlier, that they said they are going to withdraw the case from courts, where they had asked the courts to issue this no work, no pay order. But what are your thoughts regarding this story? It's a lengthy read.
Okay, thank you, Balajan. So, Johetsu, which is a joint health sector union, has issued a 15-day ultimatum. Now, this is in addition, and this 15-day ultimatum will expire on the 21st of September. Now, let's put that at the back of our minds. The Nigerian Medical Association on the 30th of August issued a 21-day notice. That expires on the 20th. Now, let's put this two at the back. The National Association of Resident Doctors has since been on a strike.
Yes.
Now, Johetsu comprises nurses, the auxiliary staff, the consultants, the physicians. Now, where are we heading to in the health sector? And some of these issues appear to be recurring issues. There are judgments that have not been complied with. Why have they not been complied with? Who has suffered for it? Why have heads not rolled? Now, they're asking that the retirement age be increased from 60 to 65. What is the challenge with doing that? It's not like we have sufficient numbers of professionals in the first case. Now, if the ones who are still here have to retire prematurely at 60, what then happens? Because let's not forget, the younger ones are already emigrating in mass numbers.
Yes.
So we have a real and present issue with our health sector. Now, underlying all of this, apart from the government's nonchalance over the years, is the problem of funding. Funding still remains a serious problem. And until we get that right, we're going to have issues. Because in one breath, the government is asking them to go to work, whether or not you're paid, whether or not your allowances are ready. Is that not an act of hostility towards them? Because they see the politicians in Abuja who seemingly appear to be doing next to nothing. And they never have to wait for their monies or their salaries. They always get it on time. Same thing with the executive. Now, beyond this, the labor minister he's I want to believe in a country of 150 million or 100 million, whatever the figure is.
200 million is what they usually
Whatever the figure is, we can find someone who's more diplomatic. He's not helping the matter because some of these things boil down or come down to the way, the manner of approach and the language used. He's not very diplomatic. And when there's an issue, a diplomatic person will be able to manage it a lot better. And it's shocking to know that he's actually a trained medical
He's
doctor.
a medical doctor. And guess what? Adding, just continuing along the line of your thoughts, Dr. Chris Ngige, the Minister of Labour and Employment, is blaming the delay on the implementation of the National Basic Healthcare Provision Fund that was signed 7 years ago by the president, made available into law.
That should have been President Jonathan.
All right. But he's blaming the non-implementation on the states. Where does that leave us? And then put in context, the possibilities of what could happen in 50 after that, the expiration of the 15 days ultimatum. The nurses, the midwives, all go on strike.
To be fair, basic health is actually in the state domain, same as basic education. So the states are dropping the ball on that matter. Having said that, the federal government has sat and looked at them drop the ball and has done nothing.
Okay, in addition to what Cheta has said, under the law that sets up the National Healthcare Fund, there's a provision that each year 1% of the revenue that goes into the consolidated revenue account should be used to fund that fund.
Yeah.
Now, since that law was passed into law, right? That act was passed into law. It's only been funded once in 2018. Why is that
When
the
was
case?
it passed into law?
2014,
That's-
December 2014.
That's precisely what I was trying to bring out.
So it's only been funded once in 2018. So 2015 to 2017, there was no funding.
What could be the logical reason behind that happening?
Money no day
logical.
now.
So
It has no
Is it just
partisan
about
roots.
no? Is it just about money not being available, or the fact that there's no accountability and they're not checking to see that?
so there are a number of
this is being
factors.
done? Yeah.
One, money is an issue, but then beyond that is the nonchalance and impunity of the officials who are meant to carry out the work. Because what the law says is whatever enters that consolidated revenue account, take out 1%.
Exactly.
Immediately.
So it's
At source,
yes. So we cannot say there has been no money at all. That's not correct.
Again, could it be because it was passed into law by the former administration?
No, Valentine.
It's-
Sorry, that's
That's
tragic.
an irrelevancy. In the
No,
matter.
but
Because the law is the government.
government,
is continuous.
government
Yes.
should be a continuum. But as we've seen here
And
over the
because you're with
years,
CSA.
the reality is quite different.
Unfortunate. All right.
Finally, last point, still boils down. There is no accountability. There are no sanctions. So nonsense like this will continue to happen.
Thank you very much. And we'll see that in many of the stories this morning. No accountability, no sanctions. Just like Akionshi on Okwoluwa on YouTube says, this is not the first time. That's going back to the judiciary. Such issues have happened in the judiciary. I agree with Cheta. Sanction is dependent on who is involved. I suggest sanctions for the lawyers also, says Okwe from Broad Street. Thank you very much. Cheta, let me come to you for the next story. Sokoto, Kebbi, 3 others witnessed service disruptions as Zamfara's 2.1 million phone users lose access. The federal government on September 3, citing rising cases of insecurity in Zamfara and adjoining cities, ordered the Nigerian Communications Commission, NCC, to direct all telecommunication providers operating in the region to shut down services in the state. The providers have obeyed this order and have shut down services. And this article in The Guardian breaks down the economic impact. Now, Cheta, the governor of Zamfara State, Bello Matawale, had earlier last week announced the closure of all weekly markets in the state. And again, as part of measures to address the worsening security situation, they've said no more telephone calls or data services in the state. Schools have been shut in the state. So basically, the state is not functioning. Would you not say that this is the terrorists winning in terms of actually shutting down an entire state in Nigeria because we are grappling with tackling insecurity?
But it is. And the NCC order was very clear that base stations in other states that their signals codes could extend into Zamfara should also be shut down. So, for example, it's very possible that at the far end of say Benin Gwari in in Kaduna or Goronyo in Sokoto, that you will not be able to get service.
Yes.
Which is you are being punished for what is happening in Zamfara.
Yes.
Now let us look at the whole idea of shutting down estates because you want to get terrorists. It's probably the worst idea in terms of asymmetrical warfare. Because for a start, these terrorists, yes, they have camps in the forest, but they also mingle with the people. That's one. Number two, which is just as important, is the fact that in many of these places, the terrorists, so for example, in Katsina, they are on a stipend, which means that government officials know them. They know their leaders. Then the conditions which led to these terrorists coming to prominence have not been tackled. The grinding poverty, the fact. So, for example, the Daily Trust was it. The day before yesterday, no, the Nation, the day before yesterday, had a story about a young man, Aliu, who became a bandit for the purposes of revenge. Why did he become a bandit for the purpose of revenge? His father bandits attacked their house, raped his mother and two sisters. Him and his father were forced to watch. A few days later, the bandits came back, claimed that the mother and sisters were sweet, so carried them away. And he hasn't seen them again. And his father was just basically accepted it as the will of God. So the young man was so angry that he became a bandit. He first joined the village vigilante, but the village vigilante were clearly not interested in pursuing those bandits. So out of frustration, he now went to become a bandit so that he will find the people who took his mother and sisters. Those little stories of people seeking revenge and then ending up perpetrating the same acts that forced them, that brought them into the cycle of vengeance seeking, haven't been dealt with. The bottom line, what drives a lot of this thing, is lack of justice. You have a situation where, so for example, Buhari Ndeji, when he was still alive, and he wasn't killed by the government, it's important to point that out. Kind of like Abubakar Shekau in the Northeast was not killed by the government. When Buhari Ndeji was still alive, he used to hold courts. As in, people in villages, when they had disputes, would go into the forest to seek for dispute resolution from these people. These little things are the things that chip away at the legitimacy of the state. What we are seeing is state formation because of loss of legitimacy, because the government hasn't done what it was meant to do. Abdulaziz Yari, who is Matawale's predecessor, spends more of his time in looking for the hand of Buhari's daughter rather than being a governor. So when you have a situation where government officials don't do what they are meant to do, why should we be surprised that things will fall apart from underneath them?
All right.
My
Thank you very
goodness.
much, Cheta.
And this is closely linked to the next question that I would, perceive most people would ask. So why then NIN? Why have we
Let's
got
not
to...
talk about things that are not worth it.
Okay, so the Nigerian Communications Commission has proposed a fine of 200,000 naira for mobile communication service providers that fail to verify and validate biometrics, NIN, and other personal information for each subscriber to their services. Mr. C, what do you have to say on this?
Okay. Valentine, well, the story says that a proposed fine is going to be put in place. But the bigger question, just like Chacha said, what exactly was the point of NIN? What was sold to Nigeria, what was told to Nigeria was you will not be able to use your SIM or your mobile number without linking to your NIN and your national identity number. And then in cases of abductions, kidnappings, or other criminal offenses, that they will be able to get the perpetrators. But since this NIN SIM linkage was introduced, shockingly, the number of abductions have gone up, kidnappings gone up, murderous activities gone up. And in each case, we're wondering, how are the abductors so confident to call. They don't change number, they call. And then you cannot track the phone, you cannot track the address, because to register a SIM, you must provide an address, whatever it is, even if it's a fake address, provide an address. They take your time in taking your biometrics, your fingerprints. What then was the point if you're never going to use it? Now, it's disgraceful that they're now suggesting that networks that fail to carry out this process properly will be fined only 200,000.
So 200,000 per customer.
Per customer.
That fails
No. You see, I think the sanction
money
is
no
too
dey.
little.
They fails to raise their revenue target. This is a money raising
It's
exercise.
beyond that. Beyond that. This is a security matter, right?
Please.
Every telco can afford to pay 200K, but if you know,
Per customer.
no, trust me, if you know you are at the risk of losing your license because of infractions like this, the message will cascade from the top right down to the very bottom, so that even corrupt agents of these telcos who are tempted to think along those lines will think twice about it.
Absolutely. We'll end with this comment from Tayo Naja. What shall it profit you to do NIN and then shut down telecommunication access because of criminals? We'll continue this conversation. There's a long message from Fatai, and we'll be opening up Lagos Talks 9 in 1 with that, because that's a good way to begin conversations. A big thanks to our analysts, Mr. C and Cheta. Thanks very much. And to all our online or offline analysts in terms of your messages and comments. Thanks. Let's take this further during Lagos Talks 9 in 1. We'll open the phone line so you can get talking. From Valentine Ohu.
And I am Irese. Stay with us. My God.